Hello, this is Jay with Sojourn Cyclery. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the process of drawing your frame step by step. I'm going to do it in a way that you should be able to follow along if you're using a drawing board. The first construction line I'm going to put in will be a line that will represent the seat tube, and the frame size, or the seat tube length in this case, is 54 centimeters. Next, I'm going to draw a line slightly above the origin, something like this, horizontal. And the dimension I'm going to put in at this point will be what's called the drop, which is the distance between the bottom bracket and the center of the wheels. In this case, it's 7.2. I can now put in my angle, the seat tube angle. And on this bike it's going to be 73 degrees, so that's kind of a critical angle. Now I'm going to draw the effective top tube at a point about 2.5 centimeters from the top of the seat tube, and I'm going to give that a dimension of 54 centimeters. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to draw in a line that's going to represent the head tube angle. The angle of my head tube is 72.5 degrees. There we go. I'm next going to draw a point along this wheel center line, and I'm going to dimension that point to the head tube angle. That dimension should be 4.7 centimeters, and what that represents is the fork offset or the fork rake. From that point, I'm going to draw a line up until it touches the head tube angle, and I'm going to throw a dimension on this, and that dimension is the distance from the axle to the crown of the fork. This data is taken straight from the fork manufacturer. In this case, it's 38.0 centimeters. I'm going to zoom into the head tube at this point. I've drawn a line here perpendicular to the head tube angle that's going to represent the bottom of the head tube. And then I need to make a dimension from that line to the top of the fork crown, which will be the thickness of the headset that I'm going to use. In my case, I'm using a 12mm headset. Zooming out again, I'm going to make another construction line that will represent the top of the head tube. Got to make sure that it's parallel to that. Zoom in here a little bit and throw this dimension on between here and here. And on this frame, I want a 14.5 centimeter head tube. So let's zoom out here and see what else we can put in. Let's throw in our chainstay length right now, starting at the bottom bracket. And I'm going to tie that right into that wheel center line and throw a dimension on there of 43.2. That seems like an odd dimension, but what that will do for this bike is it'll allow me to use a Gates carbon drive on this frame. The skeleton of this frame is starting to take some form. I've got the wheel centers now. The front wheel and the back wheel will be centered at those points. I'm going to turn my attention to the bottom bracket. I'm going to zoom into that a little bit and draw a circle that's going to represent the size of the insert that I will use for that bottom bracket. And in my case, it's 1.5 inches. Sorry about the mixed units, but that's the way they come. While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and throw in the dimensions for the seat tube insert, and that will be Well, the C-tube insert is 28 millimeters, and I want to add a millimeter to give it a little bit of wiggle room. So I am going to make the offset 14.5 millimeters on each side, like this. While I'm in the business of putting in the insert sizes, I might as well attack the head tube here. First I need to extend that line up all the way to the top of the head tube. And I'm going to use the same trick. I'm going to do an offset entities, but this time the insert is 36 millimeters, so I want to bump that up to 37 millimeters. So my offset distance is going to be 18.5 millimeters. Select that line, and that looks good to me. Trim it up here a little bit. Okay. Next I'm going to add the thickness of the wood to the wall thickness of the insert. So I'm again going to use my offset entity function, and I want 6 millimeters on that side and 6 millimeters on this side. Zoom out, do the same thing on the seat tube. And I think I'll change this and this line into construction lines just to make it a little bit more clear what's going on here. Zooming it out a little bit, you can see what we've got going. I also need to add the wood thickness to the bottom bracket, and that is done the same way. Employ a little bit more trimming here to make this a little bit more clear. Like so. Zoom out again. Now I want to put the down tube in, and I'm going to start at a point, and this is sort of personal preference, but I like to leave just a little bit of space for a decorative bushing from the bottom of the down tube to the bottom of the head tube. I'm going to zoom out and try to draw in the line that will be the bottom of the down tube, starting at that point that I created, and I want it to run tangent to the bottom bracket shell. Trim that up a little bit to make sure we've got this in the right spot. Looks pretty good. And while I'm at it, I might as well change this up into a solid line. Now I'm going to make the thickness of the bottom tube 4.7 centimeters, and that thickness can vary depending on the size of the frame. This is a relatively short frame, so I think that's a pretty reasonable down tube thickness. So next I'm going to put in the curved line that comes from the head tube all the way down visually to the center of the rear wheel. This line by far takes more time than anything else. I'm going to use what's called a style spline. Start here at this center line. And a style spline, you just make a lot of little dots, and the style spline kind of flows between the dots. And once you finish it off, what's nice about the style spline is you can grab these little handles and kind of pull it around. And this takes a lot of time to get this the way I like it. Just kind of general rules that I tend to follow is I don't want this arch to ever not go down. I want it to be a continuous slope downward. And I tend to like to have it come in rather straight where the rear drops are going to go. So I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to go ahead and play with this a little bit offline here until I get something that I'm happy with. Okay, I've played around with this quite a bit. I have something that makes me happy now. I've drawn a couple construction circles here. What's going to happen is this top tube is going to taper a little bit from the head tube as it approaches the seat tube. So this circle is about 6 millimeters bigger than that one. I'm going to use my friend the style spline again to create a style spline that will come in tangent to this circle as well as this circle on the top and the bottom. So as before, this is a sort of tedious process. Rather than bore you as I go through all these clicks and adjustments, I'm going to go ahead and go offline here and come back when I have something that looks good. So I have these two style splines now touching the two construction circles, and I like the way the line flows. I want to show you now how to make the seat stay. The seat stay thickness is uniform, 17 millimeters. So I'm going to do the offset entities again. Just click on that, and that should be 17 millimeters divided by 2 since I'm doing it on both sides of the line. And there we go. Pull the trigger on that and do a little bit of trim work. Throw some fillets in, and this thing is really starting to take shape. So now I'm going to turn my attention to the chainstay. I've drawn about a 25 millimeter construction circle here. I still have the original bottom bracket construction circle. So all I'm going to do is draw a line that's tangent on the top edge and the bottom edge. I added a tangent relationship with these lines in these two construction circles and extended them. And now all I have to do is trim it up a little bit. I'm going to put the wheels in. I'll start at the center of that drop and drag a wheel or radius out that looks something like this, as well as one right here at the end of the fork rake. And I need to dimension these. I would recommend that you measure your actual wheel. There's some data you can find online for wheel sizes, but nothing is as sure as if you measure your wheel. And all you have to do is take a tape measure and measure from the center of the quick release to the ground and double that. So I've done that with my wheels. They're 69 centimeters. I can actually put in the ground line. So I'm going to draw a line here across that represents where the bicycle would be touching the ground. So the main reason I did this was so I can trim off the chain stays and the seat stays accordingly. So I'm going to trim the seat stay a little bit long. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to be able to form that as sort of a semicircle around the tire. So I can trim that. And for the chainstay, what I typically will do is just offset the tire by probably 20 millimeters and then come in and trim that off as well. Okay, let's just go ahead and delete the rest of that offset line. So it's starting to take shape. So I'm going to finish adding more fillets to this. You can see I've put a few in already, but I'm going to make this one 15 millimeters here, like so. Looks good. I fast forwarded here a little bit to show you what this looks like with all the fillets in place. I want to put rather generous fillets in these places that could be high stress locations. A lot of it also is just looks, and you also have to keep in mind what the radius of your router bit is. You can't make a sharp corner like this, for example. That's going to have a little bit of a fillet in it once this is finished off. So I used my model sketch to create this finished drawing. Notice I have several spots here where they have intersecting lines. Those will be places where I'll drill a 1/8 diameter hole and use it to align the template to the stock. This drawing is actually full scale, 1:1, so I would print this out and glue it to a piece of plywood if I'm going to do this manually, or I would glue it to a piece of 1/8" masonite to use as a template as I do my laminations. So thanks so much for watching. I would very much appreciate it if you would subscribe and like this video.